You know, I saw her on television. I was sitting in a comfortable bar and I was minding my own business. They had one of those award shows on the TV. When the camera went over the audience, I saw her.
Yeah?
And I knew if I went out to California, I'd find her.
I thought you were dead, man.
And now I know. Now I know why the old man always said you look exactly like your mother.
Yeah? I must look like her too, huh?
She's living with a producer. Or she was then, I don't know.
Was she? Was she glad to see you?
Oh, yeah, she was, yeah. She said it was the funniest thing she ever heard of. She wanted me to come in and move in with her. California is, yeah, it's very funny. It's even better than here.
California's nice, huh? Nice place.
California's like, yeah, California's like a beautiful wild girl on heroin. Who's high as a kite, thinking she's on top of the world, not knowing she's dying even if you show her the marks.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies, and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of ColoniaBook.com, and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fitchick.
Hi, everyone.
Da, 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 da. We are recording this on the 4th of July. I don't have plans. Do you have plans?
I'm staying inside with air conditioning. It is brutally hot where I am. Kind of that.
But we're going to be talking about a very fun American author and an American filmmaker and a very interesting American cast. If this is your first time joining us, maybe you're an S.C. Hinton fan, maybe you're wondering if we did The Outsiders. It must have been a long time ago because people have been asking lately if we did The Outsiders. We did.
Yes.
But we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, this is a podcast about movies that have been adapted from literary sources. So although we say book, and this time we are talking about a book, sometimes we mean a play or a newspaper article or a magazine article because we try to crank out a brand new episode every single week. And that means we can't always do Les Miserables. So maybe one day we'll get to do it. That book is a massive doorstop of a...
That was my college freshman year.
It's a bookend in itself, right?
Yeah.
So if you have suggestions for books and movies that you think we should consider, there's a few places where you can make those suggestions. You can meet other listeners of this podcast. It's just our fun little book club of the air. And we love interacting with you on the internet. Here's where you can do that.
The best place to do that is on our private Facebook group. We do have a basic Facebook page, and be sure to like it, but we're more interactive in our private Facebook group. You do have to ask to join, and we do talk. We have a couple of posts there. One of them is all the episodes we've covered so far. We've been doing the show almost 10 years, and the other list is the ideas that people have, and we're so excited when you give us ideas, and it needs to be something we can get our hands on. It could be a song, a novel, magazine article, whatever the movie's based on, but the movie itself is very important that it has to be on a major streaming app or we can't do it. We are also on Twitter, as long as that still exists, at Book versus a Movie. And on Instagram, we're at Book versus a Movie. Or you can reach out to us by email. It's Book versus Movie Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can even support us on Patreon. And I understand we have a new Patreon member, do we not?
We do. Thank you so much, Nina, for joining our Patreon page, Patreon. As I said, we've been doing the show for... It's officially 9 years as of right now. We did cover The Outsiders in the past. That is on our Patreon page. The other episodes that are on there, we're doing everything is from 2020 and then previous to that. Coming up or currently on there, The Phantom of the Opera, The Stepford Wives, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Turn of the Screw, Psycho, and Silence of the Lambs. They're all on there, or they're going to be on there very soon. And we have a couple of very affordable options. And it really just helps us get the books and the movies and the software to keep the show together. So we really appreciate everyone that supports us at that spot. But if money is tight, we totally understand. If you could just leave us a review or wherever you get your podcasts, or just tell a friend about the show, we'd be thrilled with that.
Today's book and movie is Rumblefish. I don't know about you, but when did this movie come out? It came out in 1983. Okay, so when I was in college, which was way after this, but when I was in college, all of my theater slash filmmaker friends were obsessed with this movie. It used to show at film festivals all the time. They were always going on and on and on about it, about like all the innovative and creative this and that of this movie. We're going to get into some of that. Probably not all of it, but we'll talk about some of it. We've talked about S.C. Hinton before, as Margos said, when we did The Outsiders. We'll talk about her a little bit again. She's somebody with a massive following. So we're going to do our best. Mr. Coppola, we've talked about many, many times now. I mean, I'm losing track because he is one of those filmmakers whose MO is to adapt from literary source. And, it's just like Mr. Spielberg, there's a lot of people who that's kind of the way that they approach their work, and we are here for it. So let's get started off with our author, S.E. Hinton. I mean, what can you say about her? Just spoiler alert, I loved this book. I had never read it before. I had only seen the movie, and I had never read the book. I had read the Outsiders, and there's another one of hers that I like.
Then and This Is Now.
Yes,
like that one.
But I had not read Rumblefish until this week, and I so love this book. She's just some kind of like magical unicorn, incredible, I don't know, like just channel of a young male's psyche in a very engaging, grab you by the collar kind of. I just love this woman's writing.
Yes, she is a woman, by the way. When she first had this book published, they told her that she should signature her pen name S.E. Hinton. Her name is Susan Eloise Hinton. People call her Susie, who are her friends. They decided to keep it gender neutral, or just kind of hide her gender, just because she has a lot of male protagonists in her stories. The first, she was born 1948 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She went to Will Rogers High School. She began the novel when she was 16, which is 1965, and she based it on real life in her school. There were greasers and socias, and there were fights, and there were cliques and gangs and things like that. She was just this kid who wrote something, and she had a friend whose mother was an agent for children's literary authors and like got her a book deal with Viking. The first book was The Outsiders, which was published in 1967. I have to say, like, my friend's son last year was assigned to this book. And he was shocked that it was like, I knew about it. And I was like, well,
it's so good.
Right. Like the older teenagers for me told me about it. It's always been a part of our lives. It was always there. It's just sold extremely well. And in the 70s, she had a few books. That was then. This Is Now was the next one. And then she wrote Rumblefish, which came out in 1975. By the time that Mr. Coppola directed The Outsiders, that movie did okay at the box office. It's one of those movies that once it was on video, I don't know about you, like how many parties I went to where this movie, it was like in the mid 80s. I
feel like I know every line of the movie. I mean, we just loved that book, and the movie. It's one of those situations where you have that movie has so great on so many levels. The only thing is
Stay Gold.
That song. Why? I don't understand. Anyway, it's not a good song. But the film itself is so good, and it's one of those situations where if you've read the book, the film's going to enhance your enjoyment of that, and vice versa. That's a really rare. When you get the synchronicity of that, it's so cool. It's so good. It's just so freaking good. It's such a great book. If you've read it, you know. And what can you say? It's just the best. So this Rumblefish is from the 70s, though, right? Comes out a little bit later. Although this is the part that I was one of the many things that confused me about this film. But the book is set kind of at the same time, though, right? As Outsiders. It's sort of like late 50s. Am I reading that correctly?
But maybe it is just set in the 70s, or maybe she means late 60s. It's not that much of a difference between 75 and 83. That's like one generation really of teenagers, but I don't think she even really gives too many markers for the date. She doesn't mention movies or music that they're into. So that's probably one of the reasons why it kind of still it kind of grabs you, because it's not stuck in some kind of a time period, sort of.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. There's not you're right. There's nothing about music. Like The Outsiders has a few mentions of things that place you in a time. But it is believable that this could be the 70s if you're talking about something that's not a major metropolitan area. If you are in like a Tulsa, Oklahoma, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Kind of like when we were talking about The Last Picture Show, and, that you have a backdrop that's sort of not stuck to the present day. It's still kind of in the past somewhere, but not. It's there's a lot of stuff in this book. It's not long. It's short. Yeah. It's a very quick read. It doesn't have a lot of atmosphere. Like we're not getting a lot of the place. We don't know exactly what city they're in what part of the U.S. What is the date? What is the ethnicity of people? I think, right? I know it opens, he's on the beach.
Well, let's just say just a little bit more about Hinton is that she still lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's married to her college sweetheart. She had one son. She wrote a few more books. Very private. Last year, Ralph Macchio released his autobiography, and he did a stop in Tulsa because Tulsa, and one of our listeners says he was going to try to go by the Outsiders Museum because he lives about an hour away. But her work is a big deal in Tulsa. She's a big Okie and is a big star there. And she was interviewed about the time that she came to his book signing. And she says, I'm sick of talking about the Outsiders. I wish people would ask me about Rumblefish. That's the one that I'm really proud of. Like I said, she lived in California, Northern California for a little bit, but she really just stays there. And I knew somebody who worked at Viking when that was I don't even know if that word, that imprint even exists anymore. But they said she would come into meetings and she was just like, I mean, seriously what you would picture, just this person from the Midwest, very quiet, very reserved. And she is extremely successful, and she's tried other kinds of work as well. She also was worked on the screenplay for this movie with Francis Ford Coppola, we should say. We'll talk about the story in a minute, but they were collaborating on the screenplay at the same time that he was filming The Outsiders. So, and there's a lot to be said about that coming up. But anyway, she's still with us. She's writes fan fiction, and I guess she's like just retired now. She kind of just does whatever she wants, which is good for her.
Fan fiction of what, though? Aren't you dying to know?
Yeah, there's some shows she likes, and I want to say Twilight, but it's not Twilight. There's some vampire show that's on the CW or something that she loved, and she would constantly talk about it, and she visited the set, and I think she wrote some of the screenplays.
Love that.
Yes, me too. She's not a snob. This is not a snobby person. Like, she's just... like I said, she was 16 when she first wrote her first book. She was just writing what she knew, and it was YA. Although we could say also, YA didn't exist. I mean, there was children's books and there were adult books. Like YA not like prevalent.
You had some certain outliers like Catcher in the Rye. But you're right. As a specific genre, she's really the one that's credited with, kind of planting the flag, and this is a thing, and people are going to write in this particular style and for this particular audience. And you don't have to be that age to love YA, of course. Right. But she is definitely a humongous figure in the YA genre, and for good reason. I mean, she's such a brilliant writer. She's such a great writer. She does such a good job of, and you really see it in Rumblefish, but she does such a good job of giving you the inside world and the outside world, and just the interplay between the two of them she does in such an interesting way. And I don't know how she manages to write these amazing, these male characters who are struggling with so much, and then there's multiples of them. Then they're all. I just so admire her so much, especially looking at The Outsiders and knowing how young she was. That's what I'm saying is to have that kind of character development in such a young writer is just mind blowing because it's so freaking good, and she only gets better. I think this is such a great book. I just love this book.
Yeah, same. Well, let's just talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Our protagonist is Rusty James, and they say his name a lot, and you'll hear his name in the movie a lot. And then I posted the Facebook group. It reminds me of a commercial when I was a kid called Rusty Jones. Do you remember that? Hello, Rusty Jones. Goodbye, Rusty Car.
Hi, I'm Rusty Jones, and I'll fight rust for as long as you own your car, even where a factory warranty leaves off. From the rocky coast of Maine to the Gulf of Mexico, thousands of dealers offer my Rusty Jones option, the one new car option that appreciates in value. I'll stay with you.
Hello, Rusty Jones. Goodbye, Rusty Cars.
Maybe it's East Coast.
Was it like maybe it was an East Coast thing? No.
Yeah.
Was it like a car paint, like Earl Scheib kind of a thing?
Yeah, it was a car. It was a car. It was like a car, like wax or whatever.
People used to take their cars in to get painted. Remember that?
Yes.
You'd go and get your car. I'll paint any car, any color, $99.95 or whatever it was. Yeah, that was a thing people did. But yeah, it is like a commercial. Like the especially in the movie, it's like the whole movie is Rusty James, Rusty James, Rusty James. Well, Rusty James.
You know, so that's one of her affectations, I guess. Because she does that with The Outsiders. We have Pony Boy.
Right.
Yeah. So Rusty James is in California, and he's about 21, 22 years old, and he's running into a friend named Steve, and Steve is living in California, going to college, and he says, "Hey, man, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you?" And Rusty's like, "Well, I just got out of juvenile hall or, you know, wherever he was sent." Mm-hmm. And he says, "Now I'm just kind of finding my way out here." And Steve is like, "Oh my God, do you remember when we were kids? It was so crazy and we got in trouble. And you remember the motorcycle boy?" And as he's talking, it's bringing up a lot of memories for Rusty, who's like, "Yeah, those aren't great memories." Not delighted. For me.
Yeah, he's not delighted. It's interesting. I love the way she sets the scene because when he's at the beach, he's just like chilling at the beach. And this guy, Steve, he's like, "Oh, that's Steve." And Steve comes up and talks to him. And at first you, the reader, are like, "Oh, this must be," you know, like when you bump into somebody you went to high school with and they're like, "Oh, hey, da, da, da." And, you know, you sort of remember them. They're older. They look different, right? Yeah. And so you think it's that kind of an interaction. And Steve, and it happens, you know, the person will be like, "Oh, you still hang out with so-and-so?" And you're like, "No,
I haven't
that was
seen
30
them in 20 years ago." Yeah. I moved every few years when I was growing up. So this is like a lifetime.
Yeah, that must happen a lot.
Oh, yeah. People find me on Facebook and are so upset because I'm like,
sorry.
Oops. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But so he says, when he brings up the motorcycle boy, which is a weird thing to call it, you know, you don't know who that is. But you do know that Rusty James is not jazzed to be reminded about it. As the story, you know, then that's the first chapter. And then he's remembering, you know, the whole bulk of the book is his remembering of it. And we come to learn Steve was Rusty James's best friend.
Yeah.
He wasn't just like some guy. They were best friends. And arguably, Steve saved his life, even, you know. And Motorcycle Boy isn't just some guy from the neighborhood. He's Rusty James's brother. So I love that she sets it up like that to give us Rusty James's state of mind. That here is a young man who we learn very quickly that he has been in the reformatory. So something has happened to him. We also learn in the first chapter, although we don't know the nature of his relationship with Steve or Motorcycle Boy, we know, number one, he's been in the reformatory. Number two, he's been in a knife fight and almost died.
Right. He has a scar. That's healing. And he notices it and says, "Oh, you still have that scar." And he's kind of like, "I haven't thought about that in a long time."
Yeah. How do you not think about a massive knife scar on your torso.
He's going through.
Okay.
Well, also, there's a certain
He's obviously, there's some stuff going on.
drinking as well is what I'm getting. I'm getting drinking and drugs maybe are things that he got into
but
later.
Perhaps, but he says, but later at the end of the book, because at the end of the book, we're back in the present, quote unquote, present day at the beach. And Steve invites him for a beer. And Rusty James says, oh, yeah, in the reformatory, I stopped doing any of that stuff, and I don't do that anymore. But you're right. In the past, like when he goes into the reformatory, he's definitely doing that kind of stuff. So then he's like, oh man, why did he have to go bring up Motorcycle Boy? And you're like, you, the reader, are like, well, what's that about? What's a Motorcycle Boy? I don't know. And then now we're going to go back to the past. I mean, just the whole setup, like I'm instantly intrigued.
Yeah.
I'm instantly intrigued. Why is he at the beach? Well, why, who is this guy, Steve? And at first, there's even a point where you're like, well, why doesn't Steve just like leave this guy alone? Obviously, he doesn't remember you, dude, but he does remember. And the reason he's not leaving him alone is because this was his best friend.
They're from the same little town in Oklahoma.
Yes.
And they're both, and like you would meet when you see somebody in a different place than where you were from.
If I'm up in Sacramento, and this has happened a couple of times, if I'm up in Sacramento and I'm working on a great big thing, and I learn that we have one of our members there who is from Oxnard, you best believe I'm going to find that person and talk their ear off. Apologies to anybody I've done that to, by the way, but that's just going to happen. I'm going to be like, where in Oxnard are you from? What street did you live on? How'd you end up here? How long have you lived there? What high school did you, I mean, I am not going to get out of their face. So I get it. I'm that person. I'm a Steve, but in this case, it's because like this was the guy's closest friend.
Well, we should also say they were 14 when the events that we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
They're very young.
Big difference between the book and the movie right there is the age of all of the boys. They're much younger in this book. Good point.
Yeah, they're 14. So that's a freshman in high school. They're literally just kids. And Rusty is like drinking at times. He doesn't use pills and he doesn't use heroin, which is a thing that's like catching on in his group. But he's in a gang of guys. First, he was at a pool hall, and he hears that the guy named Biff wants to kill him because he said something about Biff's girlfriend, Anita.
He said something disparaging, and I can't remember. Oh, we don't know what it is. They don't tell us.
Right.
He just says, one of Biff's, I mean, that's how boys are. One of Biff's like, Biff's going to come and like beat the crap out of you, man. So yeah, this guy comes in and tells him that Biff wants to kill him because
you better look out, little McFly.
Yeah. he wants to
Biff,
quote unquote kill him because he said something about Anita. And Rusty James, the book says, I turned to the other guys and I told them what I said. We don't know what it is. I told them what I said, and they all agreed that it was true. So, okay. But, I mean, it's one of those things. So he's challenging him to a fight.
Right.
And Rusty James instantly is like, sure.
He's not afraid of fighting. And he even says, like, once I'm in the zone.
Like, it's been a while. Sure.
And it could be just young and he doesn't feel as much pain. We find out eventually, like, he does have these group of friends, but they're all kind of hoodlums-ish. He's in high school. He actually likes high school. All of his friends are there, but he's just not book smart. He's not somebody that's into reading, and he's not unlike what we had in The Outsiders, where they loved reading and they were reading stories to one another. This guy is like, nah, I auto shop and I'll hang with my buds. That's about his
although his father and his brother are big readers.
Yeah.
They read a lot. And his girlfriend also reads a lot. He has a girlfriend we learn named
Patty.
Patty goes to the Catholic school. And so she's not at his high school with his hoodlum friends, but that's his girlfriend. And So yeah, then there's all this talk about like, oh, you guys can't fight. Motorcycle Boy said no more fighting, and we still don't know who Motorcycle Boy is at this juncture. Motorcycle Boy said no fighting. Like, what is this guy, the Fonz? What's this about? And then we learn, oh, Motorcycle Boy is Rusty's brother. Everybody clearly like really reveres and looks up to the Motorcycle Boy. We learn Motorcycle Boy has gone away. We don't know if he's ever coming back. He's been gone for kind of a long time. And that's one of the things that Rusty's kind of dealing with. And maybe one of the reasons why he was so quick to like, yeah, I'll get in a fight. He's dealing with some stuff. We learn later on too that his mom left him. Like he doesn't even remember his mom.
Right.
So he has things that he's dealing with, and now Biff wants to kill him.
Right. And just like in The Outsiders, the parents are not involved in the kids' lives. The parents are busy. They have their own stuff going on. Dad's drinking. Patty's mom has to work a lot. So Patty has to take care of her younger sister. He shows up at the house and kind of invites himself in. They make out on the couch, and he falls asleep before his big rumble. He's just not worried at all. He's like, and then he wakes up and
it's like a thing he has to do,
right.
Like pick up the dry cleaning, go
take
fight
out the
Biff.
trash, go fight Biff. He says bye to Patty, drinks a beer, heads over, meets his friends, and they have names like Smokey and BJ, and they all have nicknames. And Biff shows up, and Biff is just tweaking out on pills. He could tell. Eyes are dilated. He's just being erratic. And he's pissed because he's like, ugh, he's not going to fight fair. I don't like this. He really hates it when people are high and they fight. And he understands, like, this guy will do anything. And he won't fight fair. That's the whole thing. He just wants to fight with fists. Nobody uses guns. Nobody uses weapons. And, of course, Biff then turns out and he has his knife. They're fighting, and Rusty is getting it on him. And then he notices, he hears something, and basically it's Motorcycle Boy shows up. That's his brother out of nowhere. And he gets distracted for just a second. That's just long enough for Biff to stab him in the side. So then Motorcycle Boy intervenes and gets rid of Biff, and I keep saying Pony Boy, Rusty then goes back home, but he has the stab and his brother has to help him clean it and take care of him.
And Steve is there. Steve is there. He's not fighting. Steve we establish is Steve is also book smart. Steve is a very good student. Steve has a mother who is like terminally ill or something like that. And so also his parents also are not around. But he really cares about Rusty James, and he's shown up. It's understood that Steve is not going to be fighting at the fight. He's just kind of there for moral support.
Yes.
But because nobody wants, because Steve has a future, I guess. So Steve and Motorcycle Boy try to convince Rusty James, who has a very serious stab wound, to go to the hospital. He refuses, so they take him back to their home, and they clean him up with alcohol, which sounds so painful. And now Motorcycle Boy is back. So what does that mean?
And he's back from the West Coast. So then you find out so he comes back, and he comes back into the house, and then the father, you realize, is an alcoholic and has been drinking, and there's all kinds of tension. He's 21 years old, but he looks 25. He looks so old. He's just really kind of battered down by life. And he says to Rusty, when I was out in California, I looked up Mom, our mother, and she's with some guy, and she seems to be doing pretty well. And Rusty is upset because he doesn't even remember her, and he doesn't understand like why he doesn't hear from her and what's going on. But this sort of sends Rusty into kind of this tailspin. And his older brother is saying to him, don't get into fights, do something better with your life. But he doesn't want to listen because he's just being himself. He gets sent to a party with Smokey and the other guys, and they go drinking, and he winds up sleeping with one of their friends, one of the girls that hangs around
There's
them.
a bunch of girls there, yeah.
And that Smokey sets this up. So Rusty gets drunk, and then he hooks up with one of the girls, and then Patty finds out. And then so Patty's just like, bye, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
Just breaks up with him. So he's upset all over again about that. And then he shows up to school late, and the principal says, you know what? you're out of here. You're going to another high school. And he's upset because at that high school, that's the high school that Biff goes to. And all the guys that want to beat him up go to that high school versus the guys that are in this high school. So he's suspended until he goes.
Things are just really not working out for this young man at all. He's really having a rough go.
And he's 14. Remember that. He's just a kid. So he starts drinking, and he's hanging out, all around Tulsa or wherever the town is. He's hanging out with his brother. And like I said, his brother's trying to coax him into another direction. Why don't you try reading books? Why don't you try doing better in school, get a skill, do something? And he's just not taking that in. And then they go to a pet shop one day, and they both love animals. And he starts explaining about the rumble fish that are in this aquarium. And these are fish that are always trying to fight each other and kill each other. And he feels bad that these fish are kind of stuck in their little globes of water. Mm-hmm. And then Rusty is Steve. There's another fight, right, with Biff. So Smokey tells Patty. Smokey's the one who says to Patty, you know where your boyfriend was last night? We were all hanging out together, blah, blah, blah. So then he starts dating Patty. So he loses Patty to Smokey, but he doesn't even get mad. He's kind of like, yeah, you played a good game.
You outsmarted me.
Yeah.
Dang, I wish I'd thought of that.
Yeah, you're a smart kid. I'm not even that mad about it. But he's still upset. But all these things are happening to him. And he and his brother is trying to talk to him, but his brother's dealing with his own stuff. We don't know what the brother's dealing with. Motorcycle Boy is being very quiet about what he actually was doing in California, how he was living, whatever. And then one day, Motorcycle Boy breaks into that pet store to free the pets, which don't do that, you guys. That's not. None of the pets are going to make it.
Them.
It doesn't. No. And there's this cop that's been hanging around town that doesn't like these kids and pegs Motorcycle Boy and Rusty as being ne'er-do-wells, and they're kind of on his list. So he breaks into there. Rusty begs him not to do it. He steals, Motorcycle Boy grabs some of the fish, and he's going to head to the river and throw them in the river. I don't know if he's drunk or high or whatever.
It's not clear.
Right.
Like this, it's not clear his state of mind when he decides. Oh, and then a thing about Motorcycle Boy, a couple things that we learn about him is he's colorblind, but he's colorblind to the extent like he literally cannot see any color. He has been in many, many fights. He has taken many blows to the head. Also, he has moments of temporary deafness. Right. So his hearing will suddenly dip out and then come back in, just unexpectedly for no reason. And this happens throughout the book where Rusty James is talking to his brother, and he realizes like, oh, he's deaf right now. He can't hear me. And it doesn't seem to be, it's not clear like what is triggering that. But
I would say concussions.
Yeah, it would seem so. But yeah, it's really interesting. These boys all have, even Rusty James, who makes a lot of mistakes and has a lot of bad luck. All these boys have a certain degree of smarts and potential. But like the Rumblefish, it's just the environment that they're in is not conducive to nurturing any of their potential.
No, including Steve, whose father beats him because he comes home late. And then Rusty's surprised because he's like, well, my dad doesn't care if I'm coming or going. He doesn't care where I am. So, and Steve is asked to help take care of Rusty. And Steve's like, I could barely look after myself here. Like, I'm not in any position to take care of anyone but me. I'll try to be as good a friend as I can, but he can only do so much. So Rusty's follows Motorcycle Boy to the shop, and then he follows him to the river. Motorcycle Boy gets shot by the cop, killed for stealing fish. And
okay.
Yeah. And Rusty, so then we just fast forward to a few years later, and that's when they meet each other on the beach. Mm-hmm. And
it's not clear. I mean, we just assume that Rusty must have, acted out he's had so much in his life go wrong. We don't really know why or how he ends up in the reformatory. What for?
Right.
But he does, obviously, and it sounds like he's there for a long time. I just remember, like, there used to be, it must have been in the 80s. Here in San Diego, there was this fancy, I don't think it's open anymore, but there was this very fancy Japanese restaurant. And on each table, it would have a pair of fighting fish in the two little bowls.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Like looking at each other so you could see them all like flared up, but like in a permanent state of that. Like it seems
cruel.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right to me now. But also throwing them in a river, like in Oklahoma or wherever you are, it's also not wise.
I'm sure it's not a clean river.
Probably not a good idea either.
No.
But anyway, so we don't know. We never learn why Rusty James ends up in the reformatory, but he obviously was there for a long time. But now he's near a coast. We don't know which coast. He's on a beach. So he's gotten out of whatever that environment is, but he's also like super traumatized, and he's upset that Steve, his best friend, that
Right.
Steve has made him remember all of that. And he's so upset that at the end of the book, although Steve has invited him to come out and meet his girlfriend and reconnect, he decides not to do that and to work on forgetting what he's just remembered. And we don't know what his plans are for doing that. But yeah, I mean, he's somebody who has been just like, to understand, just permanently changed by all of these things that he had no control over. It's
Right.
so sad.
It's terribly sad, and that's the story. It's also available on Libby. There's an audiobook that I got.
Yes.
It's
Oh, who did the audiobook?
nobody famous.
Oh, but was it good?
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, good.
It's only like 3 hours too. I mean, it's a very quick read. It's yeah. It's perfect.
It's super good.
Teenage
I really enjoyed it, although it is a bummer.
Yes.
You know, it's very sad. You really worried about Rusty James at the end of the book. You're like, oh, what's going to happen
What's
to
going to
him?
happen to this guy?
I know. It's like his best
He's
friend.
alone.
Like, go to dinner with him. Go. He cares about you. The writing is just so freaking good in this thing. It is so dang good. You are in this young man's head as he's making these terrible choices, super bad choices. But you get what's leading him to make the choices in the moment. And I love it. I just absolutely loved this book.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great.
It's a super book. I keep thinking about it. It's a super book.
Your dog agrees.
My dog agrees.
All right, so let's talk about the movie. We'll play the trailer. The music is by Stuart Copeland. This is so it's going to have a very jazzy kind of sound to it.
Yeah.
It's also in the movie. We'll talk about the soundtrack.
Let's talk about this movie.
Okay, let's play the trailer and then we'll talk about this movie.
Rusty James. Biff Wilcox looking for you, Rusty James.
I'm not hiding.
He says he's gonna kill you, Rusty James.
Man, me and you, we could have run this whole side of town if you just gave me a chance.
You know, if you're gonna lead people, you have to have somewhere to go.
I wonder why somebody hasn't taken a rifle and blown your head off. The motorcycle boy.
You always try so hard to be like your brother, Rusty James.
Hey, my brother's the coolest.
Why do you dislike me so much? I mean, I've always tried to be your friend.
You know, you might have made it a while on the Motorcycle Boys rep, but you ain't got your brother's brains.
Neither, contrary to popular belief, is your brother crazy.
What is this thing? Help me understand. I remember seeing it back in the day, and I thought it was pretty good, but I mean, I was a teenager myself, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say, I don't think it holds up. There's some good stuff about it.
Well,
but what?
Well, it's filmed in black and white. Francis Ford Coppola, he helped with the screenplay, and he's directed this. Like I said, he's in Tulsa already. He's directing
Outsiders.
Thank you, The Outsiders, at the same time. So just when he's done with that, he goes here. He makes it much more contemporary, so it feels like it's like early 80s.
It does.
Feel,
well, the cars, like there's no attempt to update anything. Yeah.
We have Matt Dillon, a great cast. Matt Dillon.
The cast is excellent.
Mickey Rourke, Vincent Spano as Steve is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Diane Lane, amazing. Diana Starwood.
She's fantastic in this.
Oh, she's so good. Nicolas Cage, Dennis
He's
Hopper.
great in it.
Yeah, and
everybody.
Lawrence Fishburne.
Yep. I wish he had more to do, but that role that he was given was in the book. It's not much either.
No, Tom Waits is in this movie. He does a jazz poem thing. S.E. Hinton has a scene. Sophia Coppola plays the sister of Patty. She's Donna. It's like I said, it's black and white. It's very avant-garde. I found it very he's talking about all these movies that influenced him. Like for me, I thought for sure it was like A Streetcar Named Desire. I felt like it was kind of going for that.
Same, but no. No.
He said,
like Nosferatu and
Cabinet Caligari,
Cabinet of Caligari, and what's the other one? Like a new French New Wave, which I love. French New Wave cinema. And there is an element I do see. There are moments where I feel like we achieve that, but maybe we should just make one movie at a time, Mr. Coppola. Just one at a time. It's okay. It's okay to wait till you're finished with the one to really dive into the next one, especially when you're working with like so many of the same people. And it is, I mean, one thing that it is successful in is that it is a totally different it is a totally different vibe than Outsiders. Like it's a completely different, we're in a very kind of stylized universe.
Yes.
Of similar kinds of men, young men. And I love Stuart Copeland. I think I love his jazz work. I really do. I think he's great. I don't know. I'm confused by this soundtrack. I'm very confused, Margot. I don't like at moments it's oddly like light-hearted for some reason that I can never pin down. One of the big things that people talked about, I remember when I was in college, was how it was shot. It was shot on video in black and white. People were like really wowed that it could look so good. And it does. I think I'm not that part. I have no problems with
beautiful looking.
I think it's cool looking.
It's gorgeous
it is
looking. I think so Matt Dillon is your lead now. So he's now like 17, 18. He's no longer 14, which makes sense. And I think
It's fine.
You know, it's hard to find an
I'm not mad
actor
about that
good at 14 anyway that could play it.
No.
Like Brad
Come on.
Renfro was what maybe it that and he wasn't born yet probably. So anyway, they have so it's black and white. You have this experimental score. You have the art direction. It's so different from Outsiders, and that the Outsiders you felt like you knew that house, you knew that neighborhood. You've been in homes like that. You feel like I knew those things. Here, I noticed in scenes like there's no artwork on the walls anywhere. Not even in the
where
bars.
are we? Is this a home? Is it a pool hall? What is this? Where are we? I know.
It's very
like we're at a
odd.
lake house. I couldn't tell it was a lake house. Okay.
Been a long time since we've had that kind of trouble.
Chicken smoke? Oh, Smoke's a chicken. Bark, bark, bark.
Smokey doesn't want to come. He doesn't.
Smokey, we understand you.
Hey, Rusty.
Smoke's a chicken.
What, you don't want to come? Fine, we don't
Hey,
need
Rusty
you.
James, you know I'm gonna be there, man. But you know what the motorcycle boy said about gang
The motorcycle boy hasn't been around for 2 months, so don't go telling me about that.
What if the motorcycle boy came back and found out?
What?
I said, what if your brother came back and found out?
My brother ain't back, man, all right? I'm sick of hearing it. I don't know when he's coming back, if he's coming back, so if you want to wait around for the rest of your life to see what he says, fine. Fine, man.
Get down off me.
We are gonna be there. But let's just keep it between you two, okay?
Right.
For God's sake. All right.
Watching this film now, I feel my heart for the people who were in this room with Francis Ford Coppola for how many hours on end, and him being like, and you know what would be cool? And you know what else would be cool? Oh, and hey, you know what would be cool? Let's do this. Wouldn't that be, that's sort of what it feels like to me, is like this, somebody tell him to stop. Let's finish The Outsiders.
There's so many influences going here.
It's too much. You can't put there's a reason why people hate fruitcake. Pick a flavor. Pick a flavor, sir. And let's just stick with it. We can't be all of these things. This is sort of the problem with his Dracula.
Oh,
same thing.
Yeah.
That he wanted to put all of the ideas about the 19th century, all of them in this movie. This is the same thing. I mean, all of his film ideas. We could have been in the new wave, in the French new wave lane. That would have been fine. That could have worked. We could have been it's just too much. It's too much. And it feels disorienting. And I feel like we're losing the only thing that, like, the saving grace of this is this. The script is not a bad script.
Right.
And the performances are phenomenal. And otherwise this would be unwatchable.
It's not that long of a movie, but it feels long. It feels like it takes forever to get through the day. I'm like, is this in real time? Like, are we really going from and then there's the touches of, there's a scene where he's in shop class and then he sees Diane Lane in her underwear, off, like he's daydreaming about her. And then there's a scene I think we included a clip somewhere on Facebook, but he and Diane Lane are talking about, there's a scene where he's floating above his body. He's been stabbed again. And he's floating above his body, and then he's floating over everything. And it's this very odd artistic touch.
Francis had an idea that Rusty James would have an out-of-body experience where he would then float around the neighborhood and go into sort of a dream state. I had a different idea of what that would be. My idea what it would be like, it would be much more shocking and short and brief. But Francis, it was something that meant a lot to him. He really wanted to do the sequence where Rusty James is floating around in the town. And I ended up spending a lot of time on a crane floating around over downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I had to have my arms extended out. Or it was sort of like in a cast of a certain kind, And I'm pretty claustrophobic, so I think I handled it pretty well. I couldn't even smoke a cigarette. Like, one of the crew members would have to come over and put the cigarette in my mouth. And thank God I gave that up,
when Matt Dillon was bravely and open-heartedly willing as an artist to be tied to the contraption that made it appear as though he was flying.
A toast to Rusty James, a very cool dude.
It was so audacious, much like live theater, to try to pull that off. And I think it was the most successful part in a way because it asks the audience to experience kind of poetry in the middle of a movie that's trying to express what a book gives. And a book can give something very easily with a sentence, not necessarily so easily in a film. And also the fact that we didn't have that technology of computers to do a superimposed version, but rather he was really there with everyone, as is important to convey that this person is experiencing people crying over his death. That makes it much more palpable.
But just all of a sudden, 3/4 of the way into the movie for no reason. It's just, it's.
I like Mickey Rourke a lot, but he's probably a little too old to play.
He's 31 when in this movie, and he's playing 21. Which they talk about how old he looks, but like, really though, not that he's bad. He's not. He's great.
But there's just a lot of feeling that they're trying. Yeah. I know a lot of people really love this movie too, and I had a few people reach out on Twitter like, "Oh my god, the score is so great," and the blah blah blah. I'm like,
it's not, and the music is. Let me say this: the music is good. I'm not saying it's bad music. It's very cool music. Again, I really like his work. We went to see him at Birdland at the Jazz Club in New York City back in the must have been the mid-90s, around the time Todd and I got married. He's such a great artist.
He's one of my favorite drummers.
But he's a brilliant musician. And this, if you were just listening to this as an album, I love it. I love it. I'm just saying the choices of which cuts of this where, those were not his choices. The choices that were made of which cuts of this to put where, I don't understand. Maybe it's over my head. I do not get it. I'm just scratching my head through so much of this.
It looks different. I think it's the tan.
Yeah, I guess you get tan in California, huh? What do you think, right?
What's wrong with him?
He goes deaf sometimes. He's colorblind too. A lot of people are colorblind. It's no big deal.
He looks so old, I forget he's just 21.
Yeah, it's pretty old.
No, he looks really old. Like 25 or something.
Steve, you know what? I've been thinking, man. And I think that when I get older, I'm gonna look a lot like him. You know what I mean?
No way.
What? Tell me what's different.
Well, for one thing, the motorcycle boy, I never know what he's thinking. But you, I always know what you're thinking.
Even more so since I've read the book, because the first time I saw it, I hadn't read the book.
Right.
So when I saw it back in the day, I was having a different experience than I was this week of having just read this really great book, and now I'm going to watch the movie of it. And what? I felt over and over again. I felt like, again, sir, just let them make the movie. Just let them tell the story. It's a great story. All of the stylistic flourishes and the angles and the this and the that and the plinky music is really competing with the story in a bad way. I feel.
You know what? This is it doesn't match the dialogue Like if they're gonna do this, if they're gonna be kind of monosyllabic or very like not a flourish with their language, and we're just going with the feeling, but then we're distanced from the feeling with the music and the art direction and everything else. We're not feeling them as people. It's just kind of I'm not moved by it, and I'm glad that Patty's with Nicolas Cage. Like, why would she be with this guy who's just a jerk and just takes advantage of her? And Mickey Rourke.
There's a lot of good things about it.
Yes.
Again, all the performances are really solid. I love all of the interactions that happen, like Matt Dillon and Diane Lane. I love all of their scenes together. I love Sofia Coppola in this. I think she's the awesome little sister. She's really good in it. I think that I really love the scene where it's Dennis Hopper, who's the dad, the scenes with Dennis Hopper and Mickey Rourke and Matt Dillon. You really buy that family dynamic. I mean, all of that is really awesome. But then you have this, again, these lighting, like, can I just see them talk to each other? Do we have to have the like blinky, 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 blink music for some reason? Like, stop. Take one thing off before you walk out of the house.
Like the accessories.
Look in the mirror. Remove one thing.
That's actually great advice too.
It is.
It's really good advice.
I've been meaning to ask you something.
Yes.
Is our mother, is she crazy? Is she nuts?
She's okay. I mean, what makes you ask a question like that?
Well, she just picked up and left, man.
Yeah, well, Rusty James, every now and then, a person comes along and has a different view of the world than does the usual person. Doesn't make them crazy. I mean, an acute perception, I mean, that doesn't make you crazy.
Could you talk more?
But however, sometimes it can drive you crazy, an acute perception.
I wish we'd talk normal, because I don't understand half the garbage you're saying. And, you know what I mean?
No. Your mother was not crazy. And neither, contrary to popular belief, is your brother crazy. He's merely miscast a play. He was born in the wrong era, on the wrong side of the river. With the ability to be able to do anything that he wants to do and find nothing that he wants to do. I mean nothing. Okay? You don't understand me anymore, do you? It's for sure an actual. That's the difference. You never lost your mother. I lost your mother.
I think that I'm gonna be a lot like you when I get older.
You should pray to God now. You poor baby.
What?
You poor child.
Tab.
But yeah, it is. There's sometimes where I just feel like the humanity I'm not really getting. I'm not getting the people so much. I'm getting the attitude, but I'm not really getting, because I'm not being allowed to connect with them. And
the one thing that I feel like we don't get that is really missing, and again, nobody's faulting and the script is a good script. It is a good script. Is I feel like we don't get nearly enough of the Rusty James and Steve relationship
Yeah.
You get a lot more of that in the book. And it's really important because that is, you know, Rusty James has he has a close relationship with Steve, who is his peer, and his older brother who dies. But we don't quite get quite enough, I feel, of that. You're just like, who is this guy with the books hanging around with them all the time? A little bit of that, right? Not till a little bit too late in the film for me do we get their closeness of that relationship. It's not really clear why Steve cares so much about, like, why is he hanging around with this guy? I wish we had a little bit more of that. We don't get the stuff about Steve's dad or really his mom.
Right.
I think that's part of the problem. I feel like maybe it was there and it got cut. There's so many good things about it, but there are too many things that are in the way of those good things, I feel.
It's a little pretentious.
It's a lot pretentious. And that's unfortunate because the performances are not in any way pretentious, not a one of them. They're awesome. I think they're super good. And the fact that they were doing this at the same time as Outsiders, that's a completely different character that Matt Dillon is playing. That's a completely different character that Diane Lane is playing. All of them, all of them who are the repeats from the other cast are doing an amazing job of giving you a completely different kind of person in a similar multiverse. But yeah, it's weird. It's like bizarro Outsiders. I just don't get it, but
yeah, it's just not for me.
No,
it just,
book.
Yeah. And that's, same thing. It's going to be the book for me. That's a pretty
It's totally the book. It's a great book.
It is a really good
I loved
book.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but you can't, you just can't put all the cool things, all the things. You can't put all of them.
I think it's 1982 or 3 when he's filming it. He's out in the middle of nowhere. He probably didn't have a lot of notes, or I'm sure they don't give him notes. I'm sure they just let him do his thing. And maybe he could have used, I don't know if his wife was there because she's a very talented.
She's brilliant. I don't know. I don't know how we got here. Yeah, and I also don't. There's a lot. The whole thing for me is just a big bit. What? Huh? The poster. Why is the poster so much like the Outsiders poster?
Well, that's marketing. That's like that.
I know.
Yeah, they're trying to get that audience.
There's a lot
there.
of things.
It's like a college audience. Seriously, this movie, but it's high schoolers are the ones that are going to want to see it because they're the ones that are reading all those books. But there's nothing.
But if I love Outsiders the movie, even if I've never read if I love Outsiders the movie and I go see this, I'm not happy about that.
No, I'm sure.
I don't think so.
I didn't remember watching this before, so I'm sure I did. And
I've seen it on the big screen. I've seen it several times. In like I said, like in the 90s. I didn't see it in the movie theater when it came out, but at that age when I'm, what am I, 20, 21, I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool. I hadn't read the book and I was like, oh, this is neat. All this stuff. But now as a grown person,
yeah. I think it's an interesting.
Sorry if we're pooping on one of your favorite movies of all time, by the way.
I think it's interesting. I just think it's a little pretentious for me, and it's a little.
But the script is not though. The script is super, super solid and good. I wish it had room to breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So mixed feelings, but not mixed feelings about what we're doing next. I'm very excited about what we're doing next, which another movie that I did see in the movie theater, one of my favorite movies of all time, I have to say. You haven't done a dorking out about it.
Yeah, we did. We did actually.
Did you?
Yeah, a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. We were saying it's been you know who else passed away this past just recently was the drummer. Oh gosh, she was in Slacker. Remember Slacker? Did you see Slacker as many times as I did?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very bummer,
Butthole Surfers.
I like to read the Butthole Surfers. I like to read the obituaries in the New York Times it's a habit I got into when I worked at the Met. We used to, this sounds very morbid, but we used to check the obituaries to stay ahead of if like somebody's estate was going to be contacting the museum about maybe something that they had lent or something that they were going to donate or something. Yeah. So we used to read the obituaries. But anyway, I got into the habit of reading because they're very well written.
Yeah, they were excellent.
And so I like to look at them from time to time. And somebody else who we recently lost was Frederick Forrest from Apocalypse Now, many other things. But I always remembered him and loved him best as the hippie dad in Valley Girl, which is a movie that was made the exact same year as Rumblefish.
Yep.
With starring, and at the time he was billed as Nicolas Coppola, Nicolas Cage. What is this woman's name?
Foreman.
Deborah Foreman. What's your name? The one that's the voice of Babe, the pig.
Oh, E.G.
Yes, Elizabeth Daly. E.G. Daly, voice of Babe the pig, is in. I love this movie. I love this movie so much. It's just to place us in time. It's 2 years-ish after Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So Fast Times is already out in the culture sphere, and people are eating it up. It was a massive mega hit, especially here. You know, I was here in Southern California. Mm-hmm. I went to the same high school as Cameron Crowe, and I know the high school where he posed as a high school student. It's also not far from my house, and wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And so anyway, that was all a big part of the culture, and it kind of got bigger and bigger and crazier and colorful and more cartoonish. And the epitome of that is this movie. I cannot wait to talk about Valley Girl. And why are we talking about it on Book versus Movie?
Because it's based on the story of Romeo and Juliet. So we're going to compare and contrast them both. I am super excited also because this movie is based also on a song called Valley Girl from Moon Zappa. Her dad was Frank Zappa, so we'll talk all about Moon Unit Zappa. We'll talk about that whole thing too, because there's a clip of Good Morning America where Moon's being interviewed live and her father's sitting next to her, and it's like 7:38 in the morning here, so it's like 5:30 in the morning west, and Frank Zappa suffered no fools. I'm sure we'll talk about that because that's going to be a whole story about
which the song I don't think is in the film, but it is definitely based on the
but
there's
that
definitely
song was
like
everything
that
influenced this movie to like. So it's the song and also Romeo and Juliet. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it.
I remember hearing that song. I can't remember how old I was. I'll have to figure it out when we look at the thing. But I remember it came on the radio and I stopped and I was like, what?
So we're going to talk about that because that's definitely an origin of that movie. But also we'll touch on Romeo and Juliet. We've talked about that before, but it's always good talking about it again. And we'll talk about Valley Girl, which is streaming on Amazon. It's a wonderful film. It's so many great performances. It has so much heart to it. It's just it does. It really does. And Nicolas Cage is just he's great in, by the way, Rumblefish, but he's also in this movie.
He's super good in Rumblefish.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But
he's the lead. Here he's our lead. And, we just felt like we needed a little palate cleanser after Rumblefish.
Yes. So after that, so that's what we'll be covering next. I'm super excited about it now. I'm like, I can't wait to start sharing you guys stuff. Please follow us on all the things. Please send us your suggestions. Once again, we could do a song to a movie. Why the hell not? We've done it before. We can do it again. Please follow us on those places. bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. That's our email. If you'd like some stickers, let us know. Also, please join our Patreon page. We have some great stuff on there. We also have some free things on there if you want to check it out. Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all of my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You could find me at Brooklyn Margot on Twitter, as long as that still exists. My site is Brooklyn Fit Chick. I'm on Instagram, Brooklyn Fit Chick, and I'm on TikTok at my name, Margot Donahue. I can't wait to start posting clips. I do a lot of clips of movies on my TikTok. Can't wait to start posting them there. And
For sure.
Oh, gritty. This weather's gritty to the max.
This was Clueless before Clueless. I cannot wait.
Oh, you guys, this is going to be amazing. All right. Stay safe. We'll be back soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book versus Movie Podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn